Okay, I think it's recording. Have people got the message that this is now being recorded?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
I didn't, but that's okay. We've got confirmation. All right, so welcome back in 2026 to the AU Core Technical Design Group. This is our first meeting for quite a while, actually. Our last meeting was in November. So we've got a couple of pieces of governance and usual business to go through before we really look at what the main focus of today's call is about finishing off AU Core R2 and then talking about what comes next. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Heath. I just want to say and remind people about our meeting etiquette with Zoom. It would be really helpful in terms of taking our minutes and recording some of the decisions if you can have your name and then in brackets the organization when you sign in to Zoom. And if you're already on the call, you can just rename yourself to get that right so that we've got the right content when we're recording attendance and in terms of conversations and who's asked questions or what concerns people had in the minutes. Um, in terms of asking questions, and you're encouraged to at any point in time, you can ask questions, use the Zoom reactions to raise your hand. If you don't have access to that because maybe you've dialed in via phone, you can just say your name and your question, or just let people know that you would like to ask a question, and then we'll go in order. Um, Reminder that every one of our AU Core TDG sessions is recorded and then it's posted on YouTube. These form part of the official standards process, and so we have this transparency of ensuring that we have transcripts and the chat logs and the minutes and also the recordings of all of these available. Um, so yeah, you can post questions and comments in the chat. Um, that chat won't always be monitored in real time by the chair. So and also if it's important, because the chat won't go in the minutes, if it's important for us to discuss in the frame of whatever topic or to raise a new topic, then if you could put your hand up and actually raise that so that we can discuss that as a group, that would be great. That's the preferred approach. So I'm going to move on to the next one. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Heath. And this is an important one for 2026. So the terms for the AU Core Technical Design Group co-chairs ended in December 2025. There is a election process and coming from HL7 AU that isn't available yet. So what we're asking to do is to essentially approve the current arrangements as an interim arrangement until we have that advice from HL7 AU on the new operational processes and elections so that we can go through that. So that's probably the first important thing that we need to start with today so that we do have a chair for this meeting. So that's I think where we need to sit is to confirm whether or not there are any concerns about having the current cohort of co-chairs for the AU Core Technical Design Group continue in their roles until we have the HL7 AU election process. So I'm going to open that up to the group for questions, discussions, or comments. Brad?
Going to skip that and move that we accept the current co-chairs as continuing interim co-chairs until further notice from the board.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Brett has motioned. Is there a second?
I'm happy to second, Yoni.
Okay, thanks, Yoni. I will go to the poll for this. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote on the motion, which is to continue the current arrangements until we have advice from the HL7 AU board? All right, I will launch the vote. So you should see in front of you an electronic vote for affirmative, negative, or abstain. It's possible you may not be able to actually select a button. If you can't select a button, if you could put in the chat a +1 for affirmative, negative, or abstain, we will count that in the total. And if you've dialed in, you can just say your name and whether you are affirmative, negative, or abstain. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and I'll just look to the chat. Okay, we've got a vote in the chat. So with the current votes, we have 30 affirmative, 0 negative, 1 abstain. So that means the motion carries. We will continue these interim arrangements until we have advice from the board, which means we can actually continue our meeting today. So if you could go to the next slide, Heath. So I would like to officially open this meeting now as the chair with an acknowledgement of country, and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we all gather today, which for me are the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Next slide, Heath. Um, Our agenda proposed for today was to start with the interim co-chair appointment to confirm we could continue. Then go through usual business and updates. There's quite a few updates to talk about, as well as the upcoming Connectathon. Do the report back from the December Connectathon. This is our first meeting since the Melbourne Connectathon, and look at what's happened in the AU Core testing track and what the results are. Go through and finish off AU Core R2. So we have some official governance business that we need to do and get approved by this group to move forwards with publication. And then from there, talk about what's next. Like, what are we going to be doing after today? Since hopefully today, this is basically the last time we talk about AU Core R2, and it's all about the next release from now on. Are there any changes people want to make to that agenda? All right, I'm not seeing any, so let's move on to the next slide. And the one after. Our usual business. So we're going to start with the completion of ballot. So ballot is complete, reconciliation is complete, publication is almost done. And I just wanted to draw people's attention to the final votes. This has changed because people have withdrawn their negative votes in December. And so where we stand now is that out of the 50 voters who voted, 44 are affirmative, 6 are negative, and 1 abstained. So we have a pass rate there of 88%. We needed to have 60% to publish AU Core. So we've got a nicely high percentage, actually. And so we have the approval to go ahead and publish R2 when we're satisfied. So if you go to the next slide, which is just really showing now that all those issues are applied, and what's being brought today is essentially the publication branch. So we'll walk through the content that's in there. We'll go through what's called the QA.html, which is the automated QA report out of the build pipeline to confirm that we accept the errors, warnings, and information that is displayed, and that we are happy to proceed to publication. Next slide. All right, so let's go into usual business, which is starting off with approval of minutes. So Heath, if you could click on those minutes. These minutes were sent round, I think, probably in the first week of December. And so we need to go through and approve them. I realize this is probably dim and dusty for people. There are no outstanding feedback on those minutes that I'm aware of. Can if you can just roll down the screen so we can just confirm that, yep, we've got attendees. We've got, hang on, can you scroll up? There are no slides attached. Okay, with the caveat that slides will become attached. All right, so that's an action to attach slides to that minutes. Going down, we've got all the decisions captured. Um, and I think towards the end, because this is more of a report back meeting, um, we also have whether or not there are any actions coming out of the meeting captured at the end, of which there were none. So, with the understanding that there's an action to attach the slides from that meeting, are there any other, does anyone want any more time? Or does anyone have any other suggested changes before we look to approve those minutes? Okay, then. Who would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Marvin here. I'll motion that we accept the the meeting minutes.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. Who's happy to second?
Brett here. I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Brett. I'll now move to the electronic poll. Okay, you should now see that in front of you. Same as last time. Affirmative, negative, abstain. Put it in the chat, or say your name and your vote. So we're just going to let that go for a bit. We've got 60% of people have voted so far. Okay, that's now at 70%, so we're still looking for a few more people to say affirmative, negative, or abstain. All right, I'm going to start counting that down now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. Just looking in the chat, I think we have 2 responses in the chat. So with those 2, we have a 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 16 abstain. So the motion carries. Those minutes are approved. We'll stop sharing that. Also, for those people where this is your first meeting at the AU Core Technical Design Group, when as chair, I get to see different results from Zoom polls than you will. I get to see exact numbers. When I share the results, only percentages will be displayed on the screen, which is why I'm able to read those out for the purpose of the minutes. They're also captured in the back end so that the scribe, which is the lovely Olivia who's doing our minutes, can also refer to the exact numbers. Oh, thanks, Shelley. You've added those slides onto that meeting. Perfect. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Oh, hang on. We'll move on to the next point. Sorry. We've covered off interim TDG co-chair appointment. So let's do updates and news. So in terms of January, this is all about finishing up the work that's been done over the last year. So AU Base, AU Core, and AU e-requesting are looking to be published in the first quarter. And so AU Base has been published. So 600 is now available. And AU Core we're going to be going through today, and then that will allow e-requesting and the other downstream IGs to progress. In relation to the AU Core IG, if you want to click on, Heath, that link to Zulip, there's a question that's been posed to the community about suppressing selected QA warnings in CI builds. Just wanted to draw people's attention to this. This is going to be open, I think, probably just really until the end of today. To date, the practice has been not to suppress any warnings shown from the tooling in our CI builds. But I think that's a lot of noise, and that's certainly the feedback that's been given from a lot of people reading this, where we already know that there's like more of a tooling environment issue, and there's just a lot of noise there, that it would be better to suppress that warning and provide the explanation than to just have hundreds of these kind of white noise messages listed in the QA report. And so that poll's there. 8 people have voted, and they've all been like, yes, we're very happy for you to suppress a set of warnings. We'll leave that open till the rest of today, and then I guess proceed with whatever the community agrees with. I think maybe Shelley, if you could drop a link to that in the chat, that would be great so that people can have a look at it. If you don't know what I'm talking about in the QA.html, we'll be going through it shortly. All right, do you want to go back to the slides? Last bit is the Connectathon. The Connectathon is actually coming up pretty fast. The next Connectathon is in Sydney. Those dates are there. The March the 10th to the 12th. It's in the HL7 AU Fire calendar, but the tickets in Eventbrite aren't out just yet. So the advice I've been given, the latest advice is that there will be an opportunity for a work group meeting plus day, the first day on the 10th, which means that we have the opportunity to meet face to face or potentially do a hybrid. Which is what we did last year in Sydney. There was a hybrid call where a number of people were face to face and some people were online. Um, There'll also be the opportunity on that day for the HL7 Australian board to do some community engagement around the future governance and operational processes that they're looking to put in place, which I think is all about operationalizing the new governance and operation manual that has been put together for HL7AU. So I think there are some significant changes to how we do work that are suggested, and there's going to be, I think, the opportunity for us to ask questions and kind of engage on how does that work on that day. The next 2 days will be Connectathon days, which should be the way they always are. So we'll run an AU core track. I understand there'll be a patient summary track, an e-requesting track, a smart track, and I think there might be a couple of other tracks, but I haven't heard the full details yet. I think the tickets will come out at the end of this week. And if not the end of this week, then very early next week. They're just finalizing some details. Brett, since you're on the call, is there anything else that you can add about the Connectathon?
Nothing particularly. I think that's the current state of what we know. Of course, we'll start off. We'll need to do our planning as per usual for connectathons and what breakouts we're going to run and everything as well. So we should have a better picture of exactly how big the breakout rooms are and what we can do.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I think that's it for updates, unless there are any other updates from people on the line or any questions that people have. All right. Brett, can you talk to us about the current ballot sign up?
Sure. So we're running another ballot through February, March. The ballot sign-ups are open now. So this time for this period, we're covering the AU Patient Summary R1 working standard ballot. So that's the first release of patient summary. So that's a really important thing to look at and work through reconciliation for. And we are doing an AU base R6 sequence 6.1 ballot. There are a couple of extra items targeted for that ballot, which it's pretty limited, so we'll advise on exactly the extra items being added, but there won't be any major additions in that ballot, just a couple of extra items that we're supporting some downstream projects. So that's pretty much the content. There's some links there. There's more details on the top link there of the whole period and everything that's needed. And we do have the ballot sign up, so there's a direct link there to the page for signing up. You do need to be an HL7 Australia member in some form or representing an organisation that's an HL7 Australia member, and also have a login into Confluence and Jira to be able to sign up and participate. So we have extended the sign up, so they've been open since before Christmas, and we're going through to the 13th of Feb to allow people to sign up before the ballot period, which runs from the 20th of Feb to March. And in the middle of that is towards the end of that is the Connectathon. We'll hopefully have snapshots to test and run with there. Well, we will, because we'll have some ballots to run, plus yeah, some other things if there's anything new to look at. And that's about it, really. So yeah, if there's any questions, you can contact me. There's some info on the page there about who to contact, and if there's any issues with signing up, let me know.
Any questions for Brett? All right. So I guess just a reminder there that as the AU Core TDG, we do look after patient summaries. So a reminder for folks that who care about voting on the publication of R1 for patient summary to make sure you sign up. All right. Thanks, Brett. Next slide, please, Heath. Okay. So I think this is still you, Brett, because you were the track lead for the last AU Core Connectathon. Sorry, AU Core track at the HL7 AU Connectathon.
Okay. Yep. So if you remember long distance past of December, yeah, we did have our AU Core Connectathon track running at the Melbourne Connectathon. So for that Connectathon, we did have a snapshot, which was the 200 preview, which had basically all of the changes that were substantive for the AU Core R2 release. So it really was a good candidate for testing. So that was the snapshot we took to the Connectathon, and since then we've of course finalised that version and done the work, which we'll be reviewing the QA today. So within the AU Core Connectathon track, we did run a special stream, the AU Core 101 stream. That was really targeted at people getting started, not just with AU Core really, but maybe with HL7 Australia standards in general. So giving people a background and a place to start if they hadn't done any standards implementation or were new to trying to get into it. We had a pretty well attended track. There were at least 12, 15 people attending that track. So a whole bunch of new faces. We had some people from some healthcare providers managing their infrastructure, plus some software company attendees as well, plus some more clinically oriented folks that were kind of looking to understand fire a bit more. So through that track, we did do a big review, really, of how fire specifications go together and how AU Base and AU Core work together, and some of the other standards in the ecosystem, and what it meant to implement HL7 Australia standards. That was a good opportunity, I think, for people to ask questions and kind of come to some understanding about what all this standards profiling was about and how to go about thinking about it and at least reading the standard well. And yeah, so that was a session there run to go through that. As well, there was a quick start session of setting up a server instance. So this was Michael Lawley took us through implementing off-the-shelf open source implementation of Fire, being able to set up a server and being able to test and use the server ourselves, including things like loading AU Core and being able to do some testing and usage of that server. That gave people without any kind of implementation a target to be able to kind of set that up and get it running and being able to play with their own Fire server. So that was I think a useful exercise, and we'll probably repeat that again in future connectathons. It certainly had a few people come back to me later, getting their test servers up and running, and being able to play and do a few things at the connectathon. So I think it was a worthwhile exercise, that one, to try and get people started. Yeah, I had a few feedback items from people that attended the event and did do that, and they were really appreciative of that session because it gave them, a real kind of handle to actually get started with. Um, the other stuff that was happening in AU Core, we did do, there was some more testing of the AU Core healthcare service, which was a target for some more testing. So we had some additional systems test the AU Core healthcare service profile. We still have some gaps in coverage, so it's particularly healthcare service telecom element. So that's something we definitely need to try and cover. We really probably need more evidence of that usage to move up to FMM2. So we'll again be going around on that to try and make sure we can cover off that element coverage, to make sure we can move ahead to a higher maturity level. And we'll go through, there's some more information about how many systems that we've implemented later. Um, we did see, I gotta say, the AU Core track wasn't, there weren't that many people there just doing AU Core. There were a lot of people implementing other specifications, but there was some evidence of more indirect use of AU Core, particularly the Health Connect Australia Provider Directory as a healthcare service AU Core implementer. That was a good result, to see that in action and get people using it. We also had many smart apps running, um, connecting to servers as part of the smart app launch track. So that was something that uh, was, just people using AU Core to do their business. I might move on to the next slide, if possible. Thank you. So this, yeah, we just there was some work done to kind of show some linkages and see things, see systems interacting. So this is essentially the AU core slice of that set of implementers in the event. So overall, there were 44 different orgs represented at the event, and we noted 10 systems actually implementing AU core interactions directly. But I think too there was a set of things that weren't captured really around apps use and kind of secondary use items as well. Go, Daniel.
How do you read the Essentia participation in that diagram? Because it's sitting above a line, but there's no actual arrow going into it or out of it, whereas all the others do. Is that like just like
Good
it was
question.
a
I don't know, but yeah, I'll have to review that diagram. I think I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes, good question. Um, yeah. So I think, yeah, I think definitely. Uh, it would be good in future events to try and get a much clearer picture of the interactions happening on the day. I know there was a lot of interactions we didn't capture on the day, so I think we probably want a way to kind of at least get some formal picture of what actually happened. I don't know, we might be introducing some sessions particularly to just capture some of those things, but all, yeah. I'm thinking maybe we need a prize for the best report out from their system. But the yeah, so I think it's it was a good event. I think a lot of the kind of early adopters of the AU Core standard have kind of moved along and they really look at things like patient summary and apps now as a key thing they want to deliver. But of course, AU Core is part of those scenarios as well. So I think we're in good stead, and I think R2 got a fairly good workout through that process. Were there any questions or anything, Richard?
Yeah, Brett, I got one question on AU Core is how much use of it was profile only and how much of it was profile and interaction? Because I suspect that the profile only stuff is much more thoroughly used by people than the interaction one. But I'm interested to know what sort of progress has been made on people using the interaction approach for it.
I'm not sure I have a lot of information. We do capture some information around the interactions, especially with the capability statements and which interactions are actually getting implemented. Um, yeah, so I think most of these systems we're doing interactions of one form or another, but it's definitely we are still kind of trying to collect detail on those things.
Yeah.
We
I
all
mean,
yeah,
one of the
I
things I was thinking about is it was mentioned that a lot of the use of AU Core was by associated systems. And of course, I expect a lot of those associated systems are not using AU Core actors, but are using the profiles with their own actors. And so that's what brought up me thinking about, hey, how much use of the actors are we making as opposed to just of the profiles?
yeah,
But
Yeah, so
I
I can
think
probably
I
talk to
don't know.
that.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of our two actors with AU Core Requester and AU Core Responder, AU Core Responder has seen quite a lot of coverage, and that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like a default platform providing or a default file server providing this kind of information. So we have seen a lot of that, and we saw that early. That's not increased too much, which we didn't need to. We'd got all the complete coverage, but we've had people like Alcidion, for example, who've come into testing, who've demonstrated that they meet the requirements for that particular actor and capability statement. It's Requester um, that because that is all about where apps sit that are either looking to read or looking to search that we don't have a lot of coverage on. Um, it's I don't think we have time for the March Connectathon. But it's one of the things I was going to put to this group of maybe we need to do a call out for app developers to come along to a particular Connectathon to have a look at how AU Core works as like an AU Core requester. And get some of the results and make that a focus of one of our connectathons because we've got things like you shall be able to read, but for the majority of actual calls, you're not really trying to read, you're trying to search. You're trying to go, give me all the things for this patient in this date range, for example. So there's a few interactions that we consistently don't have any evidence of testing for that I think I think we probably need to look at that and make that a focus in maybe an R3 connectathon would be a good one.
Although I would interpret these arrows as basically interactions.
Yeah, they
So
are.
and then going back to your point about Accenture, where does that fit? That's the one that's probably profile only, right? Because with my vague memory of what Accenture were doing, it was in the context of patient summary um, and the like. So they were really just producing a patient summary, hence profile only kind of AU core stuff, whereas everyone else is interacting. So best practice is a responder, CSRO is a requester, Innovize is a requester. So better is a requester, also a responder. So, I think there is a mix there. And again, as to your point, Danielle, like a lot of those requesters are sitting over in another part of the room playing app games rather than playing a core.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, yeah, all that pre-population going on in apps is generally going to be done
Yeah,
via AU core
requesters.
interactions. So yeah, so it's really yeah,
And
I think part of it's trying to capture that. Yeah.
some interesting search criteria being applied to those
Yeah.
and the like. So it's how do we capture all that funky stuff that's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, like there's also we noted really as part of the testing, like really would like probably some time spent to return with responders using Inferno to be able to run through the complete test suite. I think especially like healthcare service, we know there are some responders that have implemented it, but we haven't really captured their their implementation of it because we haven't sort of revisited the Inferno testing with the extra content. So yeah, some of those things I think we'll probably devise a plan as to how we can capture this a little more effectively because there was definitely a lot of stuff going on and varied stuff going on in the room, but I'm not sure we really got to the bottom of exactly what was happening.
All right. Thanks, Brett. Shall we move on to the next slide? I think we can probably move past this pretty quickly. Just in summary, and find to stay on this slide, that we now have 31 different results from 31 different systems in terms of testing AU Core. I think in terms of AU Core R1, it was more like 23, so we have increased that over the AU Core R2 period. So we're in pretty good stead there. Next slide. The only thing that increased, the only number of systems that increased in terms of testing that we got results for out of the last Connectathon was healthcare service. Otherwise, that's not to say that systems didn't test the other things. It was the same systems we already have results for. Um, but there was an increase in the number of systems that were using healthcare service as a resource in the last Connectathon, which is all around some of the agency bringing the Health Connect kind of business into that. So that was great. Next slide. Right now, across all our profiles except for healthcare service, we're at AFMM2. In terms of healthcare service, we're just tracking down a couple of last kind of results from the Connectathon to then determine whether or not we actually are. As Brett said, healthcareservice.telecom, we don't have official coverage of testing of that from at least 3 systems. But I think a couple of extra systems did test that on the day, so we're just in contact to find that out. If they did, then we'll bring it to the next call to go for AFMM2. But it won't be in this release because we're about to wrap up publication and it'll be published by the time, hopefully, by the time we come back in our next call. So next slide. Which brings us to AU Core R2. And so just before I move on to AU Core R2, are there any questions about testing or what we've just talked about before we move on to the next topic? All right. Let's go into AU Core R2. All right. So where we are in the wrap up, uh, this is a subset of like the points of what we needed to do for AU Core R2 that has been presented a few times when we were going into ballot and during ballot, and now this is really focused after ballot. So that first part, ballot withdrawal has been done. I presented those results at the beginning of the meeting that the vast majority of people who voted negative have withdrawn their votes. That has increased our pass rate, but we have approval to publish. For everything we can go for AFMM2 at this point in time, we've done that. That's already in the baseline. We have a build branch, which is where it is a requirement from a HL7 publication perspective that you put together a branch of the actual publication, get it all ready, freeze it, bring it to this call to present and walk through the QA.html, which is the QA report that comes out of the toolchain. We can confirm that all the change requests and technical corrections are in there. Shortly, I guess I'll need to ask Heath to share screen on that. We'll go have a look at the change log so that we can see what changes are actually in there. And it's had an editorial review and a QA review and a terminology review. So all of those items have been done and it's now ready to bring to this group to walk through and make sure that we're satisfied that we can proceed into publication. which is where we are coming up today, which is endorsing that we can move on to publication. And that means that next Wednesday at the AU Fire Work Group meeting, we will present that to the Australian Fire Work Group, who is our governing work group. So we present our decisions of this kind of level to them to endorse so that we can proceed. And they will confirm that we've met all the process and product quality requirements and give us the approval. And then we will hopefully click the button and it could be published next Wednesday. That's the goal. Next slide, please, Heath. So we're on to QA.html run through. This is going to be difficult without me being able to share screen, but let's work it out. What I
So
wanted to do is show two views. The current build, which is always the latest content in CI, and Heath, there's a link to both the current and the build branch QA in the Teams chat, but you probably can find them anyway. The current build of AU Core, and oh, I linked you to AU Base because that is a mislink. Okay. We'll show you how many errors, warnings, and information are sitting in our master branch, our current build. The majority of these we have already run through ballot and through the last publication period and accepted. There are only a few new warnings that we need to run through and accept. What do you have up on your screen now? Let me just have a look at that.
So,
So
so this
that's,
is the 2.0 branch.
yeah. Can you show CI build QA?
I think that's the one.
That's the one. And if you scroll down and just checking, is this big enough for everyone, or do you want Heath to zoom in a bit more?
I can read it.
All right. So this page is generated. It's available at the bottom of the footer of every IG page called QA report. You click on that, it takes you to this, and what it will show you is out of the automated validation of the pipeline, a whole lot of information. We're really only going to focus in this call around the errors, warnings, and information. So if you keep scrolling down so we can get to that number. So there you see summary colon. It says there's two errors. These have both been previously accepted, but we'll just go look at them again shortly to just reconfirm that we're satisfied. There are 135 warnings and 788 information messages. This is generated by the toolchain. Errors are what IG Publisher usually believes to be an error, noting that errors can be caused by all sorts of things, which is usually about your publication environment. So, for example, if I declared my resource to be valid to a profile, some profile like IPS, but I hadn't loaded the IPS IG, it would throw an error because it would say, I can't find that profile to validate. So, there are all sorts of reasons for errors and warnings. Some of these are best practice warnings. Some of these are just general kind of information messages that are really useful for implementation guide authors as they go and build these to reference back to that help guide some of what's happening. If we can like kind of just keep going down and have a look at what these are. This is across the entire set. There's all sorts of things across examples, across our actual profiles. And I mean, altogether, it's quite a big set. Most of these are repeated. Now, before I go into really any more detail, I want to do a quick check with people on the call of whether or not people would prefer that I only focus on what's changed, as in what are the different ones we have to accept, or would people prefer I do actually a summary of everything and walk through it all. So can I get a hands up for just doing, I guess, a diff? Just gonna let that run for a bit. A few people are still putting their hands up for just doing a diff. All right, that looks to have slowed down. Okay, pop your hands down. So that was like 12 people who just want a diff. 'Cause that's less than 50% after you put your hand down, Shelley. Um, I will ask who wants me to go across all of it. If you could put your hand up, if you would prefer instead of doing a diff, I run through all, including the ones that we've previously approved. Okay, nobody. Excellent. That gives me some good direction. Okay, let's do diff then. So, in that case, I think the easiest for you, Heath, is to look at the build branch uh, of 200. Now, in here, when we go to the suppressed messages, there's been an investigation done, as we always do, to reconfirm these. And as we go through, what we will see is some of these have brackets, like error 1 doesn't. Error 2 says in brackets new, plus accepted by firework group, plus to be acknowledged by TDG. So that is an indication that this is a new error, so we haven't previously accepted it in this group, that it has actually already gone to the firework group and it has been accepted by the firework group, but we're still bringing it to this technical design group to explain and confirm that we are comfortable. Some of these haven't gone to the firework group, some have. We're just now going to focus on the ones that are new. So let's talk about those. So that one, error new. There is an IG publisher error that has been appearing for our IG and also a whole bunch of other people's IGs. That it can't find a definition for what is a particular expansion parameter. This is, according to Graham, true. What has happened is that the IG publisher toolchain runs using this, but the official definition of that particular expansion parameter hasn't yet been put into the tooling IG. So although IG publisher can use it and uses it properly, what it does is it goes and looks for the canonical URL, and since it can't find anything at that canonical URL because we haven't gotten around to actually defining anything yet, it's throwing an error. So this is expected. This isn't something we'll solve. Graham and the other people who look after the tooling, international tooling IG, will eventually create the structure definition that defines this. Any questions about that one? So this is basically not an us thing. This is a HL7 international thing. But there's no issue here for AU Core. All right. There's also the link to the Zulip chat, so you can monitor how that's going, is also in that explanation message, which confirms basically what I've just said. Let's move on to the next one then. The next one is information. So that's not an error. It's also not a warning. It's just a bit of information, but we like to go through all of these anyway. What it's telling us is that in our specification, we've made reference to some draft terminology artifacts. In this case, these two draft terminology artifacts are published by the Fire standard. So we inherit them from Fire R4. And AU Base would have also had these in them. There's nothing we can do about it. Obviously, we don't control the Fire R4 terminology artifacts. We just inherit these. And it's just ID Publisher saying, hey, you're trying to publish a trial use specification, but you're making reference to some draft value sets. So that's the explanation for why we're getting that information message from IG Publisher. Any questions about that one? All right, let's move on to the next one, which is looking at this list, information 3. Okay, this is a little bit different. The ID Publisher toolchain is providing some future compatibility warnings. There are some parts of FireR4 that were deprecated in FireR5 onwards, and some of those are used in AU Core. It's perfectly legal. They're part of the Fire R4 standard, but they are deprecated in later versions of Fire. Um, in particular, the two bullet points around the extension element definition max value set and then structure definition regex, that's actually part of the Fire standard in and of itself. So there's absolutely nothing that we can change to change that. They will just automatically go away when we move to Fire R5. Or if we move to Fire R5, or whether or not we move to R6 as a future version. The first one, discriminator type pattern, is deprecated in R5+. So that's where some of our slicing uses a pattern. That is deprecated in R5. That is something we can change in future. I think both AU Base and AU Core use this. I also think we inherit it from IPS in the AU Patient Summary project. So it's possible to change it. There's no actual error now, but it's, I guess, an information that we probably want to look at this for future versions of AU Core to make our transition to a later version of Fire easier when and if we do that. Any questions on that one? All right, let's go to the next one. So if we did information 3, we're on to, information 5, I think. Okay, so, information 5. AU Core is built on top of AU Base. And I think this is actually probably an IG Publisher-ish problem. I haven't reported it to Graham yet, but it's giving us some information that some of the value sets that we use are marked as trial use, which is exactly what they should be because AU Base is at trial use, just like AU Core is at trial use. There's no problem here. It's just providing information to the modeler to let them know that they've made reference to a trial use set of terminology and that maybe, is that really what you want? And yes, that's what we want. We want to refer to AU Base. Any questions on that one? All right, let's move on to the next one.
Why
Sorry?
do you think it's actually a problem? I mean, wouldn't you want to have any information about that and then maybe make it a warning if we had gone beyond trial use?
Well, I'm not so certain that that's necessarily useful. AU Core in and of itself is trial use. So the fact that the trial use spec is referencing trial use things,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I,
Do we give you this information or do we just assume you know about it? Thank you.
yeah, I mean, it's okay that we're getting that because it is just information. It's not saying something's wrong here. It's alerting you to it. I do think it's a little bit of noise. Brett, sorry, Brett. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just not sure why this is the only one we get. Um,
That's a
might need
good
a
point.
review. Might need to review. But anyway, I think this is fine because we expect, um, we expect this. I mean, it's correct. and it has no impact. So I think it's all fine.
Yep. All right, I might move on to the next one unless there are any other questions on that one. Okay, so that was, have I lost my place? That was information 5, I think.
That was 5. The next one I think is 10.
Oh, okay, let's go down to 10. Ah, this one has been a source of frustration for our 4 IG authors who use the obligation extension. Um, so there's the structure definition. Oh, sorry, the obligation extension. That's what that's making reference to. Every R4IG that uses the obligation extension gets this information everywhere it's used. So we get it, what? We get it 666 times. If you don't suppress it in our CI build, you're going to get 666 messages. You're using this obligation and it doesn't belong where it does. The error is not our use of it. This comes up in IPS, which has just got published and approved by the Fire Management Group. It comes up in the International Patient Access. It comes up everywhere. The issue is something to be fixed in IG Publisher. There's a link off to the chat there where it's because it's not actually causing a problem to implementers, it's pretty far down the backlog to be fixed in the tooling to make this message go away. But there's no actual problem with the specification. Any questions about that one? All right, let's go to the next one that that is new. Okay. Now we're in warnings. These are the things that you pay more attention to. Warnings are usually something that says, actually, really have a look at what you've done. There's a possibility that there's an issue here. Not always true. That would be an error. So let's keep going down to the new warnings. All of these have been previously approved so far by us. I think there might only be one. Yeah, the last one. Okay, the last one. So this is interesting. This is new warning being thrown. It's not about new content. So this has been around for a while, and this is coming up because the IG publisher toolchain keeps improving, right? It keeps getting better and better at finding things or introducing best practices or throwing up flags that will let people maybe reconsider some of the things or look at how extension management is being done, for example. So although none of the actual content this is putting a warning on has changed, we're now getting a warning on it because the tool chain itself is detecting different things. So this warning is on an example. It's in particular on the example that we're using for pulse rate. And we have added a second coding in our example for pulse rate. And I'll actually take a step back there. Pulse rate is represented using the vital signs heart rate structure. So you have to send a heart rate code. But in order to say, but this is actually pulse rate, you then send a second coding that is pulse rate. And the profile behind that has a value set binding, and it's looking for particular codes. And pulse rate isn't one of those codes. And so it's saying that you haven't, like, I've I'm detecting that you've supplied a code, but it's not one of the ones that you've formally defined in your profile. That's true. Uh, we have got implementation guidance saying that if you want to use the heart rate profile in order to send pulse rate, add this extra code, and here's an example, but we haven't formally added into the profile in and of itself that pulse rate code. So it's not an error. It is completely fine. It is legal in the profile. It's intentional that we've only done this in implementation guidance. We even in our meeting said, do we restructure the profile, or in this release, do we just leave it as guidance? And we agreed it would be guidance. And so IG publishers looked at this and gone, hey, you've given a code. It's not the one in the profile. Are you sure that's what you want? And in this case, yes, it is actually what we want. Was that confusing? Sorry. Did that make sense? Okay, I've got a thumbs up. Does anyone want me to go over that again, but maybe more succinctly? No. Okay. In that, so are there any questions on that warning? All right, that's the diff. Those are the new information errors and warnings that are being supplied by IG Publisher that we haven't yet previously approved for one of our previous releases. So if there are no other questions or anything that someone would like me to go into more detail on, or one of the ones that you saw as we skimmed down that you were like, actually, could you explain that a bit more? Then I'll ask if someone would be happy to motion to accept that set of errors, warnings, and information for AU Core R2.
I'll motion it, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Is anyone happy to second?
I'm happy to second, Yoni.
Thanks, Yoni. I'll just put up the poll for that now. Okay, you've got the poll in front of you to accept that set of errors, warnings, and information for publication for AU Core R2. All right, we've got 60% of people have voted, so we're definitely waiting for more people to vote. Whether that's affirmative, negative, or abstain. Still got a few more. All right, we're now at 75%. All right, I'm going to start counting that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and I'll just go have a look at the chat. Where's the chat gone? Over here. Okay, one vote in the chat, I see. So that makes it 21 affirmative, 0 negative for abstain. The motion carries. We are happy to accept that set of errors, warnings, and information. Alrighty, thank you, everybody. I will now make I think a last call for around publication of AU Core R2. And in fact, Heath, can you go to the change log for AU Core R2? We're just going to confirm that there are no concerns or objections for moving forwards into publication. We've gone through that error log. We'll just confirm the scope of it, and then I'll make a call for any concerns or objections. If there are none, then I'll take that to the FIRE work group next week to proceed with publication.
Is this where you wanted to go?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So we've got a change log, and honestly, we didn't make much changes in between the ballot and this. We made a lot of changes coming into the ballot for R2, but there weren't that many actual substantive changes that came out of this. So here's what is new in AU Core R2. Again, most of this has been tested at the Connectathon. Actually, all of this has been tested at the Connectathon. So the changes that were actually made to like allergy intolerance, diagnostic result, observation, and AU Core patient. Sorry, someone just had their hand up and I missed it. Did you want to ask a question?
No, sorry, it was just me.
Okay. Yep, no worries. Okay, I'll keep going. But if anyone wants to ask a question at any time, I'll go for it. Um, So there were very few changes to that were actually normative that came out of the ballot. The majority of the changes in the ballot were actually around guidance, some of which was actually moving it out of core to base. The other part was a request that came in to explain the basically the profiling approach, and how the extensions get modeled and terminology that got added in as a guidance section. But otherwise, this was pretty substantively the same as what went out to ballot, which is a great success. That's what we expect from a successful ballot, that we've put out a working standard that we think is right, that this should be the standard. The feedback we've got in has really been some, I think, really minor or trivial revisions to that, and that's what we're seeing in that changelog. And so that's what's there now to complete the AU Core R2 baseline. Does anyone want me to go walk through a specific section or to look at anything else before we basically wrap up talking about AU Core R2? All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. So I'll pose really what is the final question. Does anyone want to raise any concerns or object to publishing AU Core R2? All right. Well, I think that's that, folks. I think that we will take that and we will go to the firework group next week, which you're welcome to come along to, with a whole set of slides talking about the amazing work that this technical design group has undertaken over the last 12 months through a series of testing events and through face-to-face meetings, through information sessions and polls, and putting through all sorts of different aspects to land in what is a significantly improved baseline from AU Core R1 into R2 that expands what we have in terms of medication, in terms of AUCDI coverage, and also provides a better connection into the agency's work around Health Connect with the introduction of healthcare service. So I think we've done some pretty fantastic work over the last 12 months. So thank you, everybody. Congratulations. We're there, basically. All right. I wish I'd arranged a graphic or something for that, but I didn't. So I think we might just move on to the next slide then. Um, yeah, okay. So that's the timeline image that we'd been using in our previous meetings. So, we're quite progressed on this one now. We've come out the side of 2025 and we're in that what's on the timeline as the 22nd of January meeting, which is publication approval, which we're now happy with. And so the firework group meeting isn't on this list. What's on that timeline is that we have a deadline, or really a target, to publish AU Core by the end of January, which we're clearly quite on track for. I think it'll be several days before the 31st of January that this gets published, and there'll be an announcement on Zulip when it does. And oh, did I write 2015 somewhere? Probably. I'm terrible with dates. Anyway. And then our next set of calls is all about AU Core R3. We started talking about that in Hobart, and now we're going to go through some of the scoping and the planning, and what's going to happen next there. I think there's a, a, a more detailed slide later on what is the agenda for our next meeting. But that's sort of roughly what's coming up. And then there'll be a AU Core R2 Inferno released around the end of February, that'll match the AU Core R2 IG. So that'll go into the HL7 reference for Inferno.
Sorry,
Can you go
Danielle,
next
it was
slide?
just
Sorry.
2026 there on the graphic.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, thank you. I'll fix that. It's a bit Ouroboros otherwise, a bit sort of endlessly circulating.
All good.
I'll fix those dates. And yes, I did mean that January and February dates are 2026. Next slide, please, Heath. So the next kind of big event for us, like the next face-to-face meeting is in Hobart, and it's the 24th to the 26th of February. Um, on the 24th is a leadership evening. Um, and to register your interest for that one, you'll need to email sparked@csiro.au. I think most of the people on the line will have been sent some comms around this one. If you didn't receive comms for that, you might not be signed up to the mailing list. So you should check out the Sparked website and make sure that you are registered so that you are receiving the communications about these events. But that's going to be a really interesting evening with a whole number of presentations as well and panels, as well as I think we're going to be having some vendor demonstrations. So that's always a pretty exciting evening. Next slide, please, Heath. The next couple of days are the CDG, TDG days. And in fact, in this set, it's actually more of a joint CDG, TDG across the days. What's going to be explored in particular that we care about in the AU Core Technical Design Group is the potential around work to support what is being called an encounter record. And that is a potential new project that has been considered through the clinical design group over the last few meetings that is now coming into our sphere in terms of the technical space to have a look at what is this, what is an encounter, what is the information that comes out of that, how do we share that information, what's important, how do we search for it, and how do we think that we need to actually support that in terms of implementation across use cases in Australia. So that's going to be going on as a joint activity between the clinical design group and the technical design group. I think Maddie has linked in the chat the Eventbrite tickets. If you don't already have a place and you want to go, please have a look there. It's a wait list at the moment, but please make sure you get onto that if you want to be there, because the more and the diverse people we have there, I think the better we're going to be able to explore some of these different aspects of encounter. Heath, is there anything that you wanted to add a comment on about encounter and what we'll be looking at?
Well, I think it's more that I guess the outcome, though, what we're looking for as an outcome is to basically get support from this community to actually progress with that work initiative and what to define exactly what that implementation guide of something like an encounter record might look like, so that we can then start to actually do that as a project proposal for HL7 Australia and a Spark project. Does that kind of represent things? The intent of that session well enough?
Yeah, I think so.
So we'll have some it's still very early days on what this concept is, and we're trying to basically tease that out as part of this session, and hence the joint nature of it. So we're making sure we're getting the clinical inputs as well as the technical inputs, and I guess learnings from our past experiences in similar concepts.
Any questions about the Sparked event and anything else that you want to know? You can always email, of course, sparked@csiro.au. All right, let's move to the next slide. Next online call. So in a fortnight, here's the proposed agenda, and I'm just going to put that to this group if there's anything else we want to add in. There's basically, now that we have wrapped up AU Core R2, it's all about what happens next. So part of what I thought would be good to do, and we did it last year and the year before, is to just do a quick overview of how does the TDG currently run? What's this AU Core project that we currently spend our time on? Invite the AU CDI editors to give us an update and an overview on AU CDI, what's coming, how that's going to be progressed through 2026 to inform some of our planning and where we may want to do some other joint activities. Do some AU Core R3 planning, talking about what is coming up. I know there's quite a few things that have been flagged by people from the community, like from Charlotte and from Ricardo, on content that they want to bring into AU Core R3, and I think we'll get cracking with that, even as soon as next fortnight. And then look at any kind of preparation or pre-questions for the Hobart session, and talking about the March Connectathon and work group meeting and what we want to do there. Does anyone have an item that they want to add to that agenda? Whether that's a change request or just a topic or something. All right. If you do have anything that you want to add to the agenda that comes up later, you can either email me or you could post it on Zulip in the AU Core Zulip channel to say that you'd like to discuss something at the next meeting, and we'll make sure that we add that. I think next meeting is basically going to be where we do some of our planning and surface what is going to be happening over the release and the timeframes. And then it's basically going to be working through changes. There's a number of new profiles that have been indicated as members of the community want to bring as proposals to this group to work through. Including the agency has signaled that they would like to bring through an endpoint profile, which wasn't one of the ones that was announced at the last kind of face-to-face where we did the AU Core R3 pitches, but that's also now been flagged by the agency as something that they would like to see come into AU Core R3, so we can expect to see some work pretty soon around that surfacing. And I think there's a number of change requests from people about maybe smaller aspects or clarifications that we'll start to see coming through all of our meetings. All right, next slide. And that is it. Unless people have any questions or anything else they want to add, I think that wraps up our first meeting for 2026.
Thank you, Danielle.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll get a more detailed agenda sent out next fortnight, and it may indeed include some change requests, and we might actually be talking about some actual change in our next call. And if not next call, it'll definitely be the one after that this will start to come through. I'm pretty excited. Let's get cracking. See you all in a fortnight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye all.